Florianópolis is the capital city and second largest city of the state of Santa Catarina, in the south region of Brazil. It is composed of one main island, the island of Santa Catarina, a continental part, and the surrounding small islands. It has a population of 461,524, according to the 2014 IBGE population estimate, the second most populous city in the state, and the 47th in Brazil. The metropolitan area has an estimated population of 1,111,702, the 21st largest in the country. The city is known for having a very high quality of life, ranked as the country's third highest Human Development Index score among all Brazilian cities. The economy of Florianópolis is heavily based on information technology, tourism and services. The city has 42 beaches and is a center of surfing activity. Lagoa d'Arc and Seixal is the most famous area for tourism, recreation, nature and radical sports. The New York Times reported that Florianópolis is the party destination of the year in 2009. Newsweek placed Florianópolis in their 10 most dynamic cities of the world list in 2006. Veja, a Brazilian publication, named the city as the best place to live in Brazil. As a result of this exposure, Florianópolis is growing as a second home destination for many Paulistas, Argentines, North Americans, and Europeans. Most of the population lives on the mainland and on the island's central and northern parts. The southern half is less inhabited. Many small commercial fishermen populate the island. The fishing boats, the lace makers, the folklore, the cuisine and the colonial architecture contribute to the growing tourism and attracts resources that compensate for the lack of any large industry. Villages immersed in tradition and history, such as Santo Antonio de Lisboa and Ribeirão do Ilha, still resist the advances of modernity. The Hercílio Luz International Airport serves the city. Florianópolis is home to the Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina. There are also the Santa Catarina Federal Institute of Education, Science and Technology, and two campuses of the Universidade do Estado de Santa Catarina, amongst other institutions of higher and professional education. Etymology. The name Florianópolis was meant to be a tribute to Marshal Floriano Peixoto, the second president of the Republic of the United States of Brazil, and from Greek Empire Micron Lambda Iota Sigma. Until 1893, the city was called Nossa Senhora do Desterra or simply Desterra. Geography. Climate. Florianópolis experiences a warm, humid subtropical climate, falling just short of a true tropical climate. The seasons of the year are distinct, with a well-defined summer and winter, and characteristic weather for autumn and spring. Frost is infrequent, but occurs occasionally in the winter. Due to the proximity of the sea, the relative humidity of the atmosphere is 80% on average. The maximum temperatures of the hottest month varies from 25 degrees Celsius to 38.8 degrees Celsius, and the minimum temperatures are from 6 degrees Celsius to 11 degrees Celsius. The lowest temperature ever recorded was 0.7 degrees Celsius in September 1980, while the highest temperature ever recorded was 38.8 degrees Celsius in February 1973. Precipitation. There is significant precipitation which is well distributed throughout the year. The annual normal precipitation for the period of 1961 through 1990 was 1,517.8 millimeters. There is no dry season, and summer generally is the rainiest season. Increased rainfall occurs from January to March, with a median of 160 millimeters per month. And from April to December there is somewhat less precipitation, averaging 100 millimeters per month. The driest months are from June to August. Vegetation. Florianópolis has a native Atlantic forest-type vegetation. This vegetation has an extremely diverse and unique mix of vegetation and forest types. The main ecoregion is the coastal Atlantic forest. the narrow strip of about 50 to 100 kilometers along the coast which covers about 20% of the region. This forests extend as far as 500 to 600 kilometers inland and its ranges as high as 2,000 meters above sea level. Altitude determines at least 3 vegetation types in the Atlantic forest: the lowland forest of the coastal plain, montane forests, and the high-altitude grassland or campo rupestre. History. Carrijos Indians, a Tupi people, were the first inhabitants of Florianópolis area. The traces of its presence are verified through archaeological sites and sambaquis dating up to 4,000 years ago. The Indians called the place Mayombaipor, mountain along the channel. Around 1514 the Portuguese landed and gave the area the name Ilha dos Patos, but in 1526 it was renamed Ilha de Santa Catarina. The area supplied the vessels that went to the River Plate basin. The official settlement of the island began in 1673 with the arrival of Bandeirante Francisco Diaz Velo's agricultural company, and it continued in 1678 with the construction of a chapel consecrated to Nossa Senhora do Desterro. At this time a villa began to take form, slowly becoming a colonial settlement. To guarantee its domain, the Portuguese crown elevated Santa Catarina Island to the category of village in 1714 with the name of Nossa Senhora do Desterro, and already in 1726 they promoted it again, now to the category of town. From this date on, Vila do Desterro and mainly the port began to have a strategic function because it was situated halfway between Rio de Janeiro and Buenos Aires, possibly two of the largest seaside cities of South America at that time. For this reason in 1739 the Capitania da Ilha de Santa Catarina was created and Desterro became its capital. Soon the most expressive seaside defensive ring of southern Brazil started to be built. Santa Cruz, São José da Ponta Grossa, Santo Antonio and Nossa Senhora da Conceição da Barra do Sul fortresses. With the coming of the captaincy the population began to grow. But the great population growth happened between 1747 and 1756 with the arrival of about 6,000 settlers coming from the archipelago of Azores and from Madeira Island. The development of the agriculture, the cotton and linen industry and the commerce followed the Azorean occupation. In 1823, during the monarchy which ended in 1889, Desterro became the capital of Santa Catarina province, opening a period of prosperity with many urban works and also intense political organization. Regional elites not happy with the government centralization staged the Revolta Federalista at the beginning of the Brazilian Republic. The movement that started in Rio Grande do Sul spread to Santa Catarina and turned Desterro into the federalist capital of the Republic. The then President of Brazil, Marechal Floriano Pissotto, known as Iron Marshal, suppressed the rebellion and ordered the shooting of many people who were considered enemies of the state, in the Anhatamirima Island fortress, possibly to show loyalty to the Marshal. 1893 saw the change of the state capital's name, from Desterro to Florianópolis, that is to say, City of Floriano. Demographics. According to the IBGE of 2007, there were 406,564 people residing in the city. The population density was 928 inhabitants per square kilometer. The last PNAD census revealed the following numbers: 366,000 white people, 37,000 brown people, 4,000 black people, 400 Asian or Amerindian people. Florianópolis has a population mostly composed of Brazilians of European descent. The numbers of immigrants started to increase in the mid-18th century, mostly with the arrival of Portuguese colonists from the Azores Islands. The population of Florianópolis was composed mainly of Portuguese, Azoreans, Germans, and Italians. Further south, some neighborhoods preserved their rural village identity. The cultural heritage left by their Azorean ancestors is noticeable in their manner of speaking, in handicrafts, and traditional festivities. The small village of Santo Antonio de Lisboa is an example of colonial period architecture, and in Ribeirão da Ilha, the oldest part of the capital, the inhabitants still speak the Azorean dialect, which is difficult to understand at first. In Ribeirão da Ilha is the Church of Our Lady of Lapa do Ribeirão, built in 1806. Lagoa d'Arc and Seixal, with its many sand dunes, restaurants and seaside nightlife, and where women make lace to sell in the street, has also managed to retain many traces of its colonial architecture. On the other side, the city has taken on a cosmopolitan air with the arrival of Brazilians from other states and foreigners who chose to live there. The island, which at the beginning of the colonization period was an important whale hunting center, is today a technological pole of the IT industry. A state capital of interest to tourism, Florianópolis is currently inhabited by about 400,000 people. The metro area has about 980,000 people. Economy. According to 2002 Cepha's statistics, agricultural activities represented 0.05%. Manufacturing represented 3.41%, and the sector of the commerce and service 96.54%. Tourism is one of the staples of Florianópolis' economy. Many inhabitants and tourists consider Floripa to have a singular beauty endowed with strong lines of Azorean culture, observed in the buildings, workmanship, folklore, culinary and religious traditions. Its environmental restrictions on building and commercial development have been more or less strictly enforced, helping it to keep its original character. Between 1970 and 2004, Florianópolis' population tripled, but the local economy grew fivefold, and incomes grew in step. Opportunity seekers, urban and rural, white-collar and blue, poured in. While many Brazilian cities are struggling to graduate from smokestacks to services, Florianópolis is succeeding, thanks in part to a federal rule that for decades barred heavy industry on the island. Town elders focused on cleaner public works, which led to the founding of several public and private universities that make this one of the most scholarly cities in Brazil. To meet the demands of its academic crowd, the city invested heavily in everything from roads to schools. And now Florianópolis ranks high on every development measure, from literacy to electrification. By the late 1990s, private companies were flocking to the island, or emerging from a technology incubator at the Federal University. Local officials now say their aim is to be the Silicon Valley of Brazil, with beaches. In addition to its white sand beaches, Florianópolis offers many historical attractions, including the sites of the original Azorean colonists, the Lagoa d'Arc and Seixal Lagoon, and Santo Antonio de Lisboa. Tourism in Florianópolis has grown significantly over the past 10 years, with increasing numbers of visitors coming from other large cities in Brazil as well as other South American countries. During the past several years, a greater number of international tourists have also begun to frequent the island. As the number of visitors grows each year, Florianópolis faces the ongoing challenge of ensuring that its limited infrastructure and resources are updated to adequately accommodate them. Of particular concern are the sewers, which often drain directly into the ocean, polluting the very beaches that attract so many visitors. During the past decade, technology and software development firms also experienced strong growth. And today information technology services are one of the top revenue generators in Florianópolis. Several technology centers are spread around Florianópolis, making the city an important pole in this economic sector. The GDP for the city was 6,259,393,000 reals. The per capita income for the city was 15,776 reals. Education. Educational institutions: Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina, Universidade do Estado de Santa Catarina, Complexo de Ensino Superior de Santa Catarina, Universidade do Sul de Santa Catarina, Universidade do Vale do Itajaí, Centro Universitário Estácio da Sá de Santa Catarina, Instituto Federal de Educação, Ciência e Tecnologia de Santa Catarina, and many others. Primary and secondary schools: the Florianópolis high schools that obtained the best results on the 2007 Exame Nacional do Ensino Médio e Escola Autonomia, Colégio da Lagoa, Colégio Energia, Colégio Tendência, Colégio Expoente, Colégio Adventista de Florianópolis, Colégio Geração, Colégio de Aplicação UFSC, EEB Feliciano Nunes Perez, IFSC, Colégio de Ciceo, EEB Professor Aníbal Nunes Perez, Instituto Estadual da Educação, EEB Osmar Cunha, EEB Getúlio Vargas, EEB Presidente Roosevelt, EEB Professor Enrique Stoedic.